We spoke to artist Todd Green, who is a multi-instrumentalist.
You start with one instrument when you're young, and then you start adding them on. So I started with guitar, and then eventually got interested in the music of India and started studying the tablas, which are the hand drums from India, and the bansuri flute, which is the bamboo flute. And that led to more strings, more percussion, more flutes, until I wound up where I am now, which is essentially about 50 different instruments I play. I travel with over 30 that I perform in the concert, and I'm 20-something in the school programs.
And you do go to the schools and teach the kids a little bit about this. Right now you're doing a tour of Pahrump, different schools. How's that going?
It's going great. In fact, I had a wonderful program yesterday at the middle school.
Now, this is the tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if you listen to music here, it would never end. It would always stay like this, never get any faster. But in Afghanistan and that part of the world, it gets faster. And after a while, it gets even faster. The ending.
Got interested in blues first, and got interested in obviously rock, like all kids do, and then got interested in jazz and classical. And I was fortunate where I grew up in southern Connecticut, to have a teacher who taught me classical and jazz guitar, and that got me into Berklee College of Music in Boston. Went there for a while, but I grew up in and around New York City, and that was kind of where I felt I had to be a successful musician. So eventually wound up moving there and spent about 10 years in the city, and then realized that was a little too crazy for me, so packed up and moved everything out to Montana. Traded in the man-made mountains of Manhattan for the real ones of Montana.
So you didn't stop at just learning guitar. You seem to have wanted to expand to other instruments, and like you said, it started with you being interested in the ones from India. Why did you decide that I'm going to go and find all these really rare instruments?
Well, I think the common ground from the beginning to where I am now was improvising. Improvising is just creating music on the spot. And a lot of the cultures that I'm interested in now, mainly the Middle East and India, a lot of their music is based on improvisation. So the blues is improvisation quite a bit, and that was what I always loved. Jazz, obviously, on the Western type of music is improvised, and so that was the common thread through it all. And so when I was playing jazz in New York, I started getting interested in the improvised music of these other cultures, and that's what drew me to India initially, and then to the Middle Eastern instruments, and then a little bit here, a little bit there, and added different string and flutes and percussion from other parts of the world.
Yeah, you do play other instruments. So have you been traveling all over the world to these different countries?
I have traveled a little bit, but mainly now the best players on these instruments live in the United States, part-time or full-time. And when I lived in New York, that was a great area. Now I'm fairly close to, I live up near Lake Tahoe, so it's not too far of a drive to the Bay Area, and there's huge Chinese, Middle Eastern, Indian cultures there. And so I do a lot of work when I'm not touring with this one-man band type thing. I do a lot of work with, mainly with Persian and Indian musicians in the Bay Area.
You, like you said, are a one-man band. You work on your own. Have you been performing with other bands too as well?
Yes, I do. As I mentioned, when I'm home, there's two concert seasons that I do, doing this one-man band. This is kind of the winter, spring, and then there's a fall sometime after Labor Day. There's a summer fall. But then I'm home for a few months during the holiday season and during the summer. So that's when I spend time working with some of the musicians that are from these other countries that live here now, and so I do some work with Persian musicians, Indian musicians. And then, here and there other things. Sometimes there's commercials that I do soundtracks for, things like that.
So tell me about your teachers, because obviously you've had quite a few. What's the ones that have inspired you the most?
Well, I would say way back was the one I mentioned in Connecticut, because he really got me going away from just playing rock and blues and getting interested in and learning more about the guitar. At that time, that's all I was playing. And so it was basically the jazz and classical music, Western classical music. And so he was a big influence on me, a local teacher there. And I was very fortunate to get him because I was interested in all that, and I just was eating it up. But I would say the teacher that influenced me the most was one in Boston. His name is Mick Goodrick, and he's a legend there. Not very well known because he didn't really want to pursue that end of it, of becoming famous. But for those that in the know, especially with jazz guitar, he's a legend up there. And he probably had the biggest influence on me in terms of everything, not just music, but life and understanding, where we are, why we're here, what we're doing, what music is, the metaphysical sides of music, all that kind of stuff. He was just amazing for that. But then I've had wonderful musicians from these countries that I've studied with, from India and the Middle East. And probably of all the music I play now, Persian music, the music of Iran, is my favorite because it heavily influenced Indian music, North Indian music anyway, which is the other type of music that I love. So those are probably my main teachers but to be honest with you, once you get to a certain point, you know what to do. You just got to do it.
So I know that a lot of times in the music industry, there's a lot of very accomplished, achieved musicians that we never hear about. But there are some that you've also performed with, and tell me some of those names that the general public has heard.
Well, it depends how much the general public knows. If you're in the jazz world, I've played with a lot of musicians that have done quite a bit in the jazz world. Pat Metheny, and who is a guitar player who's in fact, Pat Metheny, if for those that don't know who he is, he's won more Grammy Awards than any musician in history. In fact, he's won more Grammy Awards than Paul McCartney, which is pretty amazing. And George Benson, I've studied with him. I didn't actually play, a gig with him or anything. But there's a lot of musicians that are doing really well now, and they're basically in the LA or New York areas that are playing with all the names that everybody's heard of.
So you yourself are a teacher now. You're teaching these kids in the schools. Do you do private lessons too?
Not too much anymore. I did it for a while with guitar, and once in a while I'll do a lesson, especially sometimes when I'm traveling, I'll do a lesson. Some kid, like maybe in high school, he has tablas, he wants to learn how to tune them or something, and I'll do a quick lesson with them like that. But mainly my teaching now is full groups. Like when we finish here, I'm going to be going to the high school and doing the music students in choir, and I think a bunch of them there. So it's essentially more of a group type overall overview of music and the power of music and that kind of thing.
I know the Pahrump Valley High School music department is excited to see you there today, and then you're going to be performing a concert tomorrow night at Pahrump Valley High School. The general public can come to that.
That's right, yeah, and I think that's a 7 o'clock start. What they'll hear there, even if they've heard the school programs, is quite a bit more music and quite a few more instruments. I essentially have about, as I mentioned earlier, 30-something instruments in the concert, 20-something in the school programs. And they're not going to hear me just play one instrument and then put it down and pick up another one and play it. I have a customized looping system that I'm able to record the instruments and layer them, so they will actually hear a band playing, even though they're going to watch me play every instrument that they're hearing. And then I'm able to actually go to different parts of a song, back and forth. So it sounds like a band playing, but it's me doing it all, and they're watching me record it all right in front of them.
What's the thing that stands out the most to you when you're actually with these students, teaching them and showing them all these instruments? What's some of the things that you take with you?
As far as their reaction to it, that's probably what I enjoy the most, is seeing their faces. And it doesn't matter if they're a kindergarten or they're a senior in high school. Or even, be honest with you, I do a lot of master classes in colleges too. And a lot of them, the common comment I get is the fact that they've heard these instruments like on soundtracks, but they didn't know what they look like. A lot of people are just mesmerized by these amazing instruments. I mean, some of these go back hundreds and hundreds of years. Just the traditions and the power of the music and the power of the sound that comes out of some of these instruments is just marvelous. And the faces is what that gets me the most. You know, it's like in the eyes, the big eyes with the little ones. You know, and wow, I can't believe that came out of that instrument. You know, kind of thing.
It gives the kids an idea that they might be able to expand their horizons too as well.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I get a lot of emails when I do concert tours, and I've had a number of them where mothers have said, you know, my 9-year-old was studying guitar, and now he wants to play this and he wants to play that, and you've totally changed his whole direction in music and stuff. You know, so yeah, it's very special to get those kind of contacts and feedback.
I'm going to let you get to Pahrump Valley High School to speak to them because I know they're anxiously awaiting you. You're definitely going to open some horizons there with those kids. So tomorrow night at Pahrump Valley High School, people can get tickets by calling the Pahrump Arts Council office, 751-6776. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And then their version of the violin, the Kemenche, which is not up here but down here.
This is Deanna O'Donnell for News 46 and KA's Country Radio.